Good morning. This is part two of Unit 4.3. And, one of the things that I left off with in part one was just talking about how, because of the efforts of the kings, they grow their power. And as they're growing their power, the people, from the nobles all the way down to the serfs, are resenting this because think about how things have been. The king gives you land, and all that the king asks for is loyalty and protection. And it gets passed down. Well, as the king starts to increase his power, he starts to become more and more, I guess you could say, cocky and desires more things. Which requires more money, and he doesn't have money really because the only thing that he has is land. And so, in an effort to get money, what he starts doing is he taxes. And he taxes anything, and he taxes everyone, and even taxes church property, and that ticks off the church. And so you have all of these things that are starting to develop, and then add to it that the kings, you can't trust them, because if they don't get what they want, they repress you and they harm you. And sometimes the king and the treatment of the king is as worse as the treatment of the previous barbarians, the Vikings and the Magyars and the Muslims that were coming in to these areas. And so we start looking at the growing power of the English kings, leading to disheartenment, if you will, from the individuals who are in England. And we ask the question, well, how can something good come from something so bad? And that leads us to this thing called the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta is a document that is so powerful that it has such an influence even on you and I today in America, because it is through the Magna Carta and other documents that pretty much helps us to write our own things for law and government and how we should live and how we should be treated. So, how is it that we get something good from someone so bad, such as King John? Now, maybe you're familiar with King John through the classic Robin Hood stories. You got Robin Hood trying to help everyone, and you've got the villain who is King John. And while it's a great story, and some of this comes from King John, the literal King John in England during this time. Of course, Robin Hood is a really good story. It's a really good movie. It's maybe based on history, but it's not full of history. But King John was one of the worst, probably the worst king that ever occupied the throne in England. And one of the things that made him so bad is that he was so cruel during a time in which, if you were in war and you captured individuals, you would spare them. I mean, you would say, you're my prisoner, but I'm not going to kill you. I'm not really going to harm you. But for John, he wanted to destroy you. He was very happy with killing you. It didn't bother him whatsoever. And one of the ways that he liked to kill people is by starving them to death. And there was a time in which he had a beef, if you will, with his former friend, and his former friend was trying to, go against him, and King John didn't like it, and so he decided he'd get back at his friend, and the way that he did that is he starved to death his former friend's wife and son. He also arranged the murder of his own nephew, who was a rival for power. I mean, so John was just a cruel guy. He was mean. He was vicious. And he might have gotten away with all of that if he hadn't have been so incompetent as a king. When he takes power in 1199, he inherits. I mean, he is given the greatest dominion in all of Europe. I mean, this guy is given the keys to the kingdom, which occupies so much land. I mean, he's got England, he's got Wales, he's got Ireland, he's got the whole western half of France. So he has been given all of this land. And within 5 years, because of his incompetence, because of his focus on being cruel and mean and unjust, he loses in 5 years almost all of those territories to the French. Now, he pretty much experiences great shame with this. It doesn't look good for him. And so he decides, well, I've got to do something. I've got to win it back. So he decides that he's going to win it back. He's going to go against the French. He's going to go and take back that which the French have taken from him. But in order to do that, what do you have to have? You have to have money. Now, he's already been taxing. He's already been doing all of these other things to get money, but he doesn't have enough money to wage a really good war against the French to get back the land that he pretty much threw away. So he begins to take unprecedented sums of money. I mean, fines were given to you if you walked on the wrong side of the street. If you took your animal outside of a little area, he would charge you 5 times maybe what the original offense would be. He took the lands of the church and would sell those to get money. He imprisoned and tortured Jewish people and forced them to pay him in order to stop the torture. All of these things were done so that he could get his money. And get his money is exactly what he does. He gets all of this money. He gets a military together. They're ready to go fight the French, and they're ready to take back all that they had pretty much lost because of King John. However, when he starts the battles in 1214, it's a complete disaster. And the reason it's a disaster is because King John, who is a brutal king, who is vicious when it comes to the way that he treats people, who's taking the money from the church, taking money from people, he's also a coward. King John can't fight. When he comes upon the forces of France, he gets scared, and he does exactly what he's done in the past. He runs away. And when he runs away, he basically returns back to England, and what does he have now? He doesn't have his land, he doesn't have the money, and he's got a bunch of people that are extremely upset with him, because here's a man who gave away all of the kingdom, basically, and then taxes excessively, hurts his relationship with his own people, takes that money, and then throws it away in a battle in which he's not even willing to fight. And so his people demand reform. They demand change. John kind of dodges them for about 6 months. He's kind of hiding from them, doesn't want anything to do with them. And then finally in 1215, these guys have had enough. And they basically come to London and they take over London. And they say, we're not giving back London until you negotiate with us, until you make changes, until you do things that are right and you make the concessions that are needed. And so in 1215, he meets the people that are against him, if you will, the nobles, and he is willing to make concessions. And these concessions will be what's known as the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta is used to share that while the king does have power, it's not absolute power. It's not complete power. He doesn't have the right to tax people just for the heck of it. He doesn't have the right to torture people just for the heck of it. He doesn't have the right to do what he wants to do, but he must be limited in his power. This is where, we'll start to see Parliament come about. We'll start to see people, working together to make sure that one man doesn't have all of this power, all of these opportunities to kind of do what you want to do. Hopefully you're starting to hear some phrases that we've used in America. No taxation without representation. You don't get put in jail. You do not have harsh and cruel and unusual punishment. That you can't just be taxed unnecessarily. So all of these things are coming because of something that took place in 1215, which was known as the Magna Carta. As you can see, it allows Parliament to develop. Now, I do want to share with you just one thing about the Magna Carta and about John. John didn't do this because he wanted to. He did it because he had to. He was under pressure, and he was using it to hopefully buy some time, to which he did. It just so happens that as soon as this agreement is reached, as soon as they make the deal, John goes back to the Pope. He goes back to the church where he had pretty much taken their land and done all of these things. But he goes to the Pope and he says, hey, look, I was forced to make this decision. I was forced to do the Magna Carta. I did it under duress. And basically, I'm just telling you that really it wasn't done the right way. And so technically, it shouldn't be held as valid. And actually, the Pope, for some reason, kind of agrees with him. And next thing you know, after a few weeks, both sides are back at war again. However, in 1216, King John dies. He dies because of the exhaustion of fighting a war, of all these issues that are facing the people. He dies, and the Magna Carta is resurrected. It will be resurrected by the form of Henry III, who comes in. And so I think that it's important to understand is that because of the Magna Carta, that in the middle of that Magna Carta, it said that a man shall not be imprisoned, shall not be exiled, shall not be deprived of property simply because the king desires it so, that we get the idea that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and property, something that our founding fathers would believe very strongly in. This is how the bad king ended up leaving us with something good that allows us today to say we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these, the rights of life, liberty, and property. So while we don't like the life of John, we're thankful for the people who rose up against John and allowed us to have this document that still exists today, over 800 and some years ago, that gives us a reminder of the freedoms that you and I are blessed to have.